How are you, Mayor?
I'm loving life. How are you?
Great. It's such a pleasure to have you here in this Miami Corona conversation, Major Pigatt, representing Opa Locka, a city that is historic in its origins and a city that under your leadership is trying to chart always a better course for its future. Tell us a little bit about Opa Locka and your leadership there. I know that you have a storied career as mayor, someone who's done everything from working with the great Carrie Meek back in the day to your current leadership now, and a lot of academic accomplishments in between, and a lot of work that you do, especially with our younger populations, as chair of the 500 role models. So just tell us a little bit about Opa Locka quickly, and just in today, how's your city?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate you taking the time, Xavier, to interview people and really document this time in our history as humanity and as a nation and as a local community in South Florida, because we're dealing with one of the greatest challenges of our time at the moment. And it's going to take quite a few people to come together to address it. So much respect for taking the time to do your research and also connect with us. When we talk about Opa Locka here, Opa Locka is a small municipality, one of the oldest cities in Miami-Dade County, founded by one of the pioneers of America's aviation industry, Glenn Curtis. So he basically, while we talk about the Wright brothers taking their first flight, Glenn Curtis is the one that built the planes to give America its wings to fly. So we were originally upper middle class community in Miami-Dade County, and Glenn Curtis was so inspired by the Moors, who were the African Muslims that basically built the largest civilization in Europe at the time, and ruled for over 700 years, and brought a lot of innovation, and basically many say re-civilized Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. So he was so inspired by that culture and that group of people, he basically modeled this city after the Moors. And we currently have we're the capital of Moorish architecture in the Western Hemisphere. So it was beautiful to see. There's a lot of history with that. Just our landscape speaks to that level of accomplishment. And then our name, Opa Locka, is actually short for Opa Tisha Waka Locka, which is a Seminole name for this area. And as you know, in Miami, most of South Florida, west of I-95 was swampland. Yeah. But Opa Locka was the land that rose above the swamp. So it was like a little safe haven for the Seminoles. And the Seminoles they're like the first real American people, if you want to really say that, because there was a mix of all of these Native Americans who were escaping the colonialism and are called self-liberated Africans. Some people say runaway slaves, but I don't like to these were people that were enslaved, and they liberated themselves, and they came down to America, and they got with all the Native Americans from the various different tribes all across the Southeast, and they built the Seminole nation, which fought and gave America its longest, costliest, most bloodiest war. And they were never defeated. That's why FSU called them the Unconquered as a mascot. So there's a lot of history when it comes to the city of Opa Locka, and to have our name representing from the Seminoles and their safe haven, and our landscape with the Moorish people. There's a lot of history, and unfortunately in the past few decades, it's been a challenging history because of the level of crime, corruption, poverty that has plagued this community for far too long. So that's basically the foundation of Opa Locka in terms of historical aspect and where we are. And relates to this virus. This is one of many crises we're dealing with at the moment. We have a financial crisis that we're in. And now we're under a financial oversight board from the state of Florida. We have a flooding emergency that we're dealing with, where our infrastructure has been in decay, like many cities all across the nation, the infrastructure, but here in Opa Locka, it's a little more severe. And now we're dealing with coronavirus. So I'm gonna stop there because I don't want to talk too much. But
No, this has been so insightful. Thank you. I mean, to have that perspective, and to name the issues at hand. I mean, that are impacting your community. Some of them, sure, could be from past internal governance, but a lot of these issues, like a virus, like a pandemic that isn't managed with a national plan and addressed with state action through its health departments, is yet another external attack on a city that's dealing with a lot. So to have a mayor, the leader of the city, just be very, very candid and open about the problems, I think is so refreshing, right? To be able to name them. And we haven't even talked about juvenile justice and all the issues that plague just kids on the ground. So there's so much to talk about. But you're right, I wanted to take this moment to focus on the pandemic, but all these issues are part of the pandemic, right? All of them, because in many ways, what we know how to do so well is kick the can down the road, right? To solve the crisis, to be reactionary, and not to really understand how we got here and how do we avoid getting back here again. Exactly. So let's just let's just focus on the pandemic really quickly, and then we'll get to those questions about what lessons have we learned, and are we going to remember those lessons for the pandemics to come. But first of all, how have you been impacted by this pandemic? You, your family, your friends, your
it has definitely touched our lives. I've lost an auntie.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to.
It says a heart attack, but the jury's still out on that. And have quite a few family members sick. I had two of my little daughters that got COVID while at the dad outside. So and had to put them on quarantine within the house. Thank God, because of our manners of sanitizing. It didn't affect my wife, my 10-month-old son, any of those, because we were very stringent with our sanitization. And I've been very focused on making sure that this virus does not impact my family, my community as much as possible. When it first came out, I'm a student, and I love to read and take in the latest information, even scientific articles. So when this pandemic first came out, I made sure to understand what it takes to spread the virus, and how to protect ourselves from it. So reading a lot of those articles from studies all across the world. So I've been very careful and advised my family about being very careful, so that we can refrain from catching it, because as things are constantly evolving, and you can start being revealed. There's a lot to this virus that many of us do not know. We're still learning about the virus and its impact on the body. And I don't want to be a guinea pig for any unknown disease. Simple as that. So until it gets figured out, I don't even want to go close to it. Don't want the family to go close to it. Don't want my community to go close to it. So we're very careful. Very, very careful. And there are ways to not get it. And we need to be clear. This disease is spread by respiratory droplets. So we need to understand what we have to do to ensure that those respiratory droplets do not get into our respiratory outlets or in our face. So the CDC guidelines of washing hands, social distancing, and mask wearing lays those foundations to ensure that you don't get it. And then making sure you sanitize things that come into your house is very critical to ensuring that we stop the spread of this virus.
Yeah, one incredible leadership that way. I mean, I'm with you. I am not going to be the guinea pig, and I am certainly doing all that social distancing and caring as much for me, but also for the rest of our society, because clearly by other people getting infected, it just prolongs how much all of us suffer. So there's a real need for us to think communally and to make sure that not just our household, but that the policies that our state, local, and federal government enact keep us all safe. And I'm not sure that all of those, in fact, I am sure that we're not doing it the way we're supposed to be doing it. Florida didn't have these numbers. Florida has numbers worse than New York did. We're in a really, really bad bind. And I think the suffering that we have endured is only going to get larger because it's an unknown. It comes back, but more importantly, it's still here. It hasn't gone away. So I want to just touch really quickly on two things you said about your auntie. And again, I'm really sorry about your loss. There's so many people that are starting to feel. We're over last night. Was 1,725 deaths in Miami-Dade County. Your auntie wasn't counted as one of those 1,725 deaths. And like so many others who might have been impacted by the virus are unknown numbers, and it is just a horrible state of affairs for our society. But you're right about the numbers. There's a lot of confusion about not just who died or who's infected and who's super spreading it without symptoms, but also, a sense of the tracing that goes beyond it, or the level of testing and all that. So we're in a place with a deficiency of information, also an increase of misinformation, and a lot of chaos in between. So we are at a bad place that way. With your children, I'm so happy that you took those those actions to protect the spread and to care for them. And again, what a nightmare for a parent, right? To know that what they love the most, what is so fragile, what's your responsibility to care for, give life to, and then make sure that life is a beautiful life, as again an external force. And I just want to, because I think you're the first parent with a kid that had tested positive that I speak to. I just want to take a moment, if you don't mind, and let's just go emotional there. Let's just talk a little bit about what that felt like and what you did. I mean, I think too many individuals just think about the elderly and don't really think about all the consequences as they're going out there being reckless and spreading the virus. And I just want to make it personal for people, just so they can see what you gave me a little bit of it, but just if you just want to dig a little bit deeper in that, I think that would be interesting to talk about.
That's fine. I think it's understandable, because many times when we look at the elected officials, we don't see them as people and human beings that have to deal with the exact same problems that everyone else is. Like, I still have a full-time job. I still have a wife. I still have 3 kids. I have all these things on top of dealing with a city that's in this crisis. So it'll be very, very difficult. And for someone like myself that is very careful and want to ensure and study this virus, to get it in my own household after doing everything to protect it was definitely challenging. It was definitely challenging. However, we needed to, at the end of the day, the kids got it. So we were in city of Opa Locka. We were one of the first cities in North Dade to have a walk-up testing site that tested children. But the requirements is 12 and older. My little ones are 8 and 10. So that means I spent many mornings waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to a testing site. Actually one Miramar, to drive up out of the county to Miramar and stay there for hours to get tested and get the whole family tested. And had to do that multiple times because you got to test if they're positive. Then you have to wait some time. And if you want to, these CDC guidelines of 10 days after the test didn't come out until later on. So we were trying to get 2 negative tests. And after 14 days, you had to go back and spend mornings, each morning waking up. Then they shut down the testing center because of rain. So you had to come back and do it all over again. And then you get a positive test and you're like, oh my God, they still have it. And you try to get another 2 negative tests. And we were going, I think went almost 4 or 5 days within 1 week time span to try and get tested in the kids. And you got to think about that. Yeah. How many families have the ability to wake up 4 o'clock in the morning, to sit in the line and then try and get back to work within that time or get to school? So when we're talking about opening up these schools and we don't even have a robust testing infrastructure for kids, and then a delay in a test is also 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 7 days. It makes it you can't do anything with it. And with kids, like I literally had to quarantine an 8 and 10-year-old in a room for over 2 weeks. So that is very difficult to do, your whole household. And then because you have someone in your household that have it, that means everyone has to quarantine. So we didn't go out for almost 3 weeks because of that, even though we constantly was tested negative. And we went out every week as parents to go get tested to make sure. That was a very difficult time, like very difficult. Literally just let them out last week, Friday. So it's only been a few days they've been out, and it's still concerned. Thank God they didn't have symptoms. We had a fever for a day, but we're really good with our health and wellness routines and remedies and teas. So we basically, the symptoms went away pretty quickly. And they've been over 21 days without symptoms, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, that's just horrific to just go through what you're saying. And you are, someone who's, served in the American Institute of Research, who's a mayor, who's, applauded for your leadership. You received awards about it. You chair. I mean, you're like as informed, as knowledgeable as anyone when it comes to this. And look at what you had to go through just to access whatever testing was available. What happens to your constituents who don't have the time, the wherewithal, or the knowledge, really, the information to do this? Have you heard from your community as to what, what do your constituents do when they email you or call? What are you hearing from the ground in Opa Locka about this pandemic?
People are tired, and they're tired of it, and it is very difficult because people are scared. We have a community of people who are we have the predispositions for the actual conditions that leads to the highest mortality rates of COVID.
Blood
And
pressure,
I saw,
diabetes, those
yeah,
you're talking
high
about the
blood
comorbidities.
pressure, heart disease, diabetes, and asthma. And when the state of Florida was originally letting out that data, I used to look at the death records from the medical examiner's office. And I saw every from the very beginning up until I think was it April they stopped. I used to get those reports and I used to look at them and I used to see like line after line, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, or hypertension. And it was very concerning because if you say those to anyone in our community, they know that's a very, very common. So there is a little bit of fear on one hand, and then on the other hand, there is this other mentality that if it's my time to go, it's my time to go.
Wow.
And yeah, there was a lot of misinformation at the beginning, and it was just very weird. It was a misinformation that everybody saying that Black folks couldn't get it. It was very rampant throughout the community, which was very concerning, like right when it first came out. And so you had that mentality, and then this talking about, oh, it's not that deadly. It's like having the flu. But then when you look at the actual pre-existing conditions that lead to mortality, it is very clear that our community was impacted. And that coupled with the fact that in Opa Locka, we had the highest rates of infection per capita. No one was studying that, but me being a researcher, I pulled up the state reports and basically found the population for many of the states on that many of the cities on that first page. And I went down the line because in those reports, you would see Opa Locka. It was a small city, 16,000 residents. And we're in that first page of all the cities in the state of Florida. And I was like, this seems, it's a lot. So yeah, I went through, lined up the cases with the number of population, found a per capita infection rate. And we were went from 6 to 5 to 4 in the state of Florida for infections. So it's very concerning, and we have a lot of residents that are concerned, and they don't know where to turn to many times. And it's all spectrum. We're a diverse community. So you got people that advocating for testing. You got people that advocating for more people wearing masks, not wearing masks. We actually was one of the first cities, right, in the state of Florida that was talking about and for putting together a mask law, a mask mandate. And we spent weeks debating about this mask mandate because it was something novel. In our state, if we came out pretty quickly with it, you probably would have had us in front page news and everybody and their lawyers trying to come at the city. But we also didn't want to do it like many of the first cities did it, where it was under the emergency orders from the state, which means that people would have a $500 fine or went to jail. The same consequences of violating a curfew. And we didn't want to continue to criminalize our residents or put a $500 fine on a community that is a very low income community. So we wanted to make it into a civil citation. But after looking at the data and how much it costs, you're talking along with hundreds, I think it was 137,000 at the low end, all the way up to the $250,000 if we as a city were to implement it. So that was a very expensive proposal. Thankfully, by the time we was getting to making that decision, after weeks of going through trying to figure out, that's when cases started to spike throughout the state of Florida. And Miami-Dade County finally instituted a mask mandate. And then later on, they came up with a civil citation. And throughout that whole time, we'll call up the mayor's office, my commissioner's office, and advocate so that we had a mask thing. And we actually implemented the first Mask Up campaign in Miami-Dade County to ensure that our community take seriously masking up. We got over 30,000 masks, distributed the masks, and we did that a few weeks ago, and a lot of the residents just really appreciated it. And it was pretty powerful. Residents and businesses, because we went to businesses and residents, hot spots, distributing masks, reusable masks, surgical masks, so that people can protect each other.
Thanks for giving us that thread of how we got to that point. And again, if we were to look back at our preparedness and look back at the lessons learned, just that mask conversation you had, all this time back and forth and trying to figure out how to use policy, how to use the law, how to use enforcement, and how to work across the state, county, and obviously a municipal level, just to try to change people's behavior, again, through law. Like the incidents in Miramar where you had to travel out of your county to get testing, and even that was an ordeal. What are the sort of broad brush lessons about how unprepared we were that you think we can distill at the end of this pandemic, and we're nowhere near the end of it, so that we can apply those lessons as we move towards the future? What if you were to sit here, you're at a round table with policymakers like yourselves, what would you say? Okay, guys, we learned from all these mistakes, all these miscommunications, lack of miscommunication, lack of information, bureaucracy, red tape, self-interest, partisan politics, whatever you want to call it. We learned all these things. These are the lessons. What do you think would, in that brainstorming session, what kind of legislation, what kind of policy would come out to try to be better prepared in the years to come? What would you do, after coronavirus is behind us, moving forward with all that happened, and we still have lessons to learn, because there's a lot of pain to come. And even when the virus is done, there's an economy to rebuild. So there's a lot of pain still in front of us. But knowing what you know now, what do you think you would do so be better prepared for future pandemics?
That's a very difficult question at a municipal level, because we're like almost one of the lowest forms on this government: city, state, county. City, county, state, and the federal government. And for an international pandemic, a lot of that has to be on the federal and state level, because we have to get huge populations in order. So it's difficult to answer that question. But if I were to provide any insight, number one, I think it is very important. And I think we have the infrastructure in place. We had a pandemic team, and we do have a CDC, Center for Disease Control. That's the actual name of it. So we have the people, and I think it's important that policymakers get very clear understanding of the disease from our experts and scientists. Get those wide-ranging perspectives from the people who study this and study how to control. I think that's what's been sorely missing. Even to this day, there are very few people that have really looked at and analyzed how this disease spreads, how it impacts the body, and the mortality rates. We usually hear it from either news clippings or small, short little videos. But it's very important that presentations be made. I wish we had a team of scientists, or it was required that policymakers would sit down and listen to scientists from across the world on what this disease is, what is the history of it, how it spreads and how it kills, and what are the treatments. So that's number one. Get that in place. And then from there, we move on, how do we ensure that the max amount of people do not get it? And those are the laws that must be put in place to ensure it. So now moving forward, there definitely needs to be a better way of locking down a community, and that doesn't too much seem as though it's infringed upon our people's rights, because that's a thing that many of us are scared of as people, is the government coming in and kind of just telling you you can't do anything. And it's a very scary thing. And there's a lot of fear around that. We cannot take that for granted. Like, there's a lot of people that feel that way. So we have to do it in a way that people understand why, and can buy into it. So that process of protecting the people on a mass scale needs to happen. And then not only lockdown, but also resources. We saw this virus coming. Like, we saw it coming. And we have the power to mass produce PPE, mass produce the testing. Due to our capitalistic country, and the division in politics is two-party system, and the capitalism that really kind of lays the foundation of how we move, that muddled everything, because then it became a political thing, one party against another party, and their beliefs and thoughts, and then it became a capitalistic thing to where now health, hospitals, health insurance, the companies that produce it paying for it. Those things just completely messed up our response to tackling the end issue, because people are worried about politics and profit. And right now, it's not about politics and profit. It's about human life, humanity. It's about the people, government of the people, like people. And the people have not been at the forefront of this. It's been profit and politics at the forefront of all the conversations. So those need to be completely taken out when it comes to the environment. We need to have a very systematic system to ensuring that we have the equipment, the laws in place to lock things down, and also the understanding so that people know what they have to do. Because at the end of the day, we can't have all the laws and legislation, but this disease is spread by people, us. And if we take the time to protect each other, that would end this. It's not too much a government thing. The government helps and save businesses, helps schools get together, helps the infrastructure, make sure the infrastructure is in play and the laws are in play. But it is us as people to ensure that this disease does not spread.
There's some government rules, obviously, such as, clearly everything you just talked about, from, supply chain, creation of PPPs to having a national policy, huge, you can't just stop your disease at your municipal, boundaries. And so clearly this is a global pandemic, and there needs to be that kind of policy. But there's also things like the disparities in healthcare, right, that cause pre-existing conditions to become the comorbidity to be heightened, because there's no access to healthcare that helps control blood pressure, that helps with diabetes, that helps with nutrition, preventative health. So those disparities exist, and also access. And a lot of, I'm sure so many from your community and across all of Miami-Dade County only access healthcare on an emergency basis when it's clearly too late. So those disparities are part of the things I also see as problematic in facing this. And if we start digging a little deeper, I think we begin to look at not just social, but racial inequities. And clearly during this pandemic, we also had some really serious criminal justice issues, insofar as how, and the pinnacle of the distress is the murder of George Floyd, right, at the hands of police officers. So when you look at that and you put it in the context of the the lack of access to health care, the fact that so many in your municipality don't have the luxury to not work, right? To stay at home because literally food needs to get to a table and rent needs to get paid, and there's no dad or uncle or bank account savings 401k that's going to help you. You can't withdraw from your 401k with a penalty because you don't have one, right? So there is so much of America and so much within your municipality that isn't prepared for a pandemic, right? And we as Americans should care for one another so that one of us isn't in that situation. But if you don't care for one another, you should at least care for yourself. And if there are others who are spreading the virus, then you're going to get sick no matter how much is in your 401k. So I think that that's the lessons. To me, that's one of the big lessons. Some systemic changes need to happen to make ours a more equitable society. And I'm just wondering if from your point of view, particularly as someone who's, been at the forefront of studying African-American history and culture in our society, as someone who addresses a criminal justice system, particularly juvenile justice system, that sees so many Black and brown faces, disproportionately so. I'm wondering if there are some social and racial inequities that you want to talk about a little bit when it comes to this pandemic and society as a whole.
Yeah, of course. Like America is comfortable with inequity. Like that is what our country was founded upon. While in the founding documents that say all people are free, there were millions of my ancestors who were not. And it was part of the system. And you got to think about it. There were people who lived a very good life, while right outside their home, there were people that weren't even recognized as people, that were enslaved, that were tortured, that were raped for hundreds of years. So since before this country was founded on this land, to over 100 years, when it was founded, it had a huge civil war over it. And then after the Civil War and African Americans were so-called freed, you had 100 years of apartheid, Jim Crow type laws of systemic racism. And that's the thing, like people talk about racism, like that's a part of America. Like it's literally in our Constitution, 3/5 of a human being. And we had to put laws in place through amendments to try and stop the racism within our own government. So it's literally only within these past, I guess you can say 50 years, because in the 1965, that's when I guess this apartheid America started to end. But then you have the drugs, you had the incarceration, school to prison pipeline, prison industrial complex. That's still redlining that has systematically pushed a certain percentage of the population to the edge of society and condemned them and locked them up. So those things have been going on for all of our history. And if you look back at the very earliest of activists, if you look at the very earliest of music, you will always hear police stop killing us. Literally, like you hear this going on. Martin Luther King said it, Malcolm X said it, Fannie Lou Hamer said, like every leader that you can possibly think and almost every artist that you can possibly hear, you will hear them talk about police brutality. So this isn't nothing new. George Floyd was one, but then you had Eric Gardner and Tamir Wright. Like, the list just goes, it's crazy when you really think about it. It's the furthest extreme you can do is say not to kill me. Like literally, that is what we're saying, not to kill. But there's a whole nother aspect to it in terms of the incarceration, the charges. It's a lot. And when it comes to health system, it's the same way, because many people who have health insurance are those who have professional jobs and well-established jobs. So you have a lot of people that are in the service industry that don't have access to really good health care. and those opportunities. So those are going to compound. Racism unless we make a dramatic change to this country, racism is going to touch every aspect. And the pandemic is just a crisis on top of that crisis, and it's going to affect us. And that's just a sad reality that people who look like me have to face in this country. That's just the way it is. And people are okay with it because it's America, and it's our policy to just disregard others and benefit ourselves. Like, that's how we feel, as though it's about us, that individual, pull yourself up by your bootstraps type mentality. It doesn't matter if somebody doesn't even have boots to pull themselves up by. It's just, that's
or
just
if you stole their boots.
Exactly, or you stole their boots. So that's America. That's the country we live in. We continue to push and bring attention to it. We will continue to ask for change. We continue to do so. We continue to do what we have to do to live and survive in this world.
Thank you. I mean, it's heartbreaking to have to hear and accept your words as truth, right? It's just this, I mean, and the way it's what's particularly heartbreaking is just your matter of fact. That's the way it is. That's where we are. And I just honor you for again, like, you're acknowledging, the truth of what's happening in your city in a financial crisis, and the truth of our racist country. So
it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate, but right now we have to deal with it, period. Like, no matter what it is, like, as a leader, representative of 16,000 residents, almost 2,900 businesses, we have to deal with this, because all of us need to eat, all of us need to live, all of us have families to take care of. So we have to navigate all these different factors to try and make this work. And we gotta know what we're dealing with. Simple as that. And I did not come into politics. Like, I wasn't from a politic family.
How did that happen?
Personally still don't even have much interest in politics like that. I'm here to serve my community, period. That is my goal, is to serve my community and make sure we're good here in Opa Locka. That is my goal, period. So I'm very straight up about the facts, tackling those issues head on, and doing what we have to do to make sure that my kids and many other kids in this family, many families, live in a better community that we can be proud of.
So I've taken a lot of your time. We're only supposed to talk for a little time, and I'm looking at the clock. So thank you for being so generous with your time. I know you're really busy. I just want to end with one last question. That's just for you to, if you wouldn't mind, just talk straight to your constituents. I know that you do it in all sorts of other ways, but just so I can capture it here, I don't know how many of them would access this this video, but what's your message of hope or of guidance to literally the people in Opa Locka who are sick and who unfortunately will still get sick and who will still suffer a lot of economic hardship? What words of reassurance or hope can you give them at this critical time of so much despair and uncertainty? What can you do as their leader? What would you like to tell them?
We are in this together. And as people, this is another chapter in our lives. We've been through quite a few things in our personal lives and as a community, and it is on us to overcome this chapter. This too shall pass. And it's very challenging. We understand that, but it is on us as people and individuals to stop the spread of this virus. The quicker that we mask up, social distance, wash our hands, and take those precautions to ensure that we don't spread the virus, the quicker we can get over this hump. And we got to take it one hump at a time, because this is a international pandemic. No one's prepared for this, but we have to do what we have to do personally to ensure to stop the spread of this virus. And as a government, we're going to continue to do what we have to do to make sure we have testing, to make sure we have masks, to get the messaging out there, and make sure that the fundamentals of our society and our community is taken care of in the infrastructure aspect. So we're going to do what we got to do. Please continue to do what you have to do to stop the spread of this virus so that we can get through this chapter and we can continue to shine as a community. Thank you.
Mayor Pigatt, thank you so much for your leadership, and stay safe and healthy. Mr. Dad, Mr. Full-time employee, Mr. Mayor of the municipality, and Mr. Civic and community leader. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Appreciate it.
Much respect. I appreciate you. You take care. And it was Kendrick Meek I work for, and 100 Black Men of South Florida.
Oh, it's for Kendrick. Oh my God.
Kendrick Meek and 100 Black Men of South Florida.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not the 500 role models of 100 Black men. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, I know you just ended the session, but tell me a little, how awesome that you worked for Kendrick. That's great.
Yeah, that was when I was at actually right when I graduated, I worked on Capitol Hill for the Congressional Black Caucus. Doing their summer internship. That's why I worked with my local representative, Congressman Kendrick Meek. And the 100 Black Men is the organization that basically saved my life when I was a wayward young man. And because it saved my life, helped me get into college and become the man that I am today, I made sure when I came back home, I was going to dedicate myself to it. So I've been a committee member, a chairperson of the premier mentoring program for young Black men in South Florida since I've gotten back home. I actually had to take this past year off, which has been something I told myself I didn't want to ever do, because I'm gonna stay committed. But yeah, I had to, because this new role of mayor, pandemic, all that, it was just a little to my hand, birth of my son. So I had to take a step back from those volunteer opportunities. But it is my pride and joy to continue to raise and mentor the next generation of leaders. And that's what we're here to do, is to make sure that more and more people of our community understand this leadership mentality, whether that be in your industry, in your profession, in your city, in your community, your state, nation. Understand leadership. So, because we desperately need good leaders, desperately. So it is important for me as one of them to share whatever information I have to others, so that more people can step up into this leadership role. More good people can step up into this leadership role. That's very straight, because that's what we need in this community. We need people we can trust, and who's going to lead us in the right direction.
You're also a community organizer for P.A.C.T, which is pretty awesome. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm sorry, I'm so taking so much.
That was my actually that was my first job when I came back home after I left AIR. My first job was community organizer for P.A.C.T, which is one of the largest community organizing institutions in Miami-Dade County. And yeah, it was a great time. I actually started one of their longest running committees, the Juvenile Justice Committee. And when Trayvon Martin was murdered, that was right when I got back home. We actually led the effort to get out of school suspension eliminated in Miami-Dade County, which Trayvon was on out of school suspension when he was murdered. So yeah, that was basically the only real policy thing we can do locally. And we did it. It took many years. So that was a great thing. I was organizing since I was in college. And to be a professional organizer and learn on that level was awesome. It gave a lot of insight into how people and money come together to build campaigns for change.
Good. Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate you taking your time. It's a really, really great conversation. Thank you.
And much respect for having these conversations and using your platform to capture these thoughts. I much respect for doing it and doing your research and putting this on. So I appreciate you, Mr. Orkatata. And whatever you need, let me know.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you again. I really will.
All
Thank
right, sounds good. Take care.